now I hear from Democrats all the time. They're like, what they get frustrated with Joe Biden is that they feel like he's not enough of a fighter, that he's not out there enough taking swings. And so I saw reports the other day that Biden said his strategy is to go for the jugular on Trump. And I think that's the right thing to do. Offense, they need to go on offense now.
Recent reporting confirms that President Biden intends to ruthlessly mock and belittle an increasingly unstable and insecure Donald Trump ahead of the election, much to the dismay of MAGA snowflakes at the Fox Propaganda Network. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we do have several clips to look at in this video, but first I want to draw your attention to recent reporting from Axios, which is kind of the predicate for this. Now, I will first say that I've talked about it in previous videos that it seems like at the start of the new year that President Biden took an increasingly, and in my opinion, long overdue, aggressive rhetorical posture. During his first formal campaign speech back in January, he referred to Donald Trump by a very accurate label, which also happens to be Donald Trump's least favorite word in the English lexicon, which is loser, right? Apparently, according to Axios, and interviews with anonymous Biden advisors and sources, this is a deliberate part, and it comes from Biden himself. So, according to Axios, Biden has told friends he thinks Trump is wobbly, both intellectually and emotionally, and will explode if Biden mercilessly gigs and goads him, quote, go haywire in public, end quote, as one advisor put it. Other sources tell us that Biden is looking for a fight. Biden's instincts tell him to let it fly when warning about the consequences of Trump winning the presidency again. Biden told the New Yorker that Trump would refuse to admit losing again. The trigger Trump approach would be a departure from the traditional Rose Garden re-election campaign, and indeed it would, especially for, I believe, today's modern Democrats who tend to be much more interested, generally speaking, in civility politics than Republicans. So the New Yorker article, the recent interview, is a very lengthy article, an interview with President Biden. It was referenced, so I want to read certain quotes here just to remind you, or certain excerpts. 4 years ago, Biden tried to position himself as a unifier in an age of conflict and name-calling, but there's less of a market for that this time, and in any case, Biden finds it hard to hide his contempt, and so it references all the times he started to lose his temper and became visibly agitated with Trump and with MAGA, but specifically Trump, during that 2024, that first, election speech. It also includes this part at the end, which I thought was really interesting. So the last two paragraphs. One of the few points of certainty is a chilling one. Half of the respondents to a CBS poll in January said that they believe the losing side of the coming election will resort to violence. They have no real reason to believe that any of that would come from Democrats, by the way. This is clearly an issue relatively exclusive to the Republican Party. Biden has an uneasy relationship to such knowledge. He is convinced that Americans will reject the Trumpist view of politics. Quote, how can we, as a democracy, elect any one president who says violence is appropriate? He asked me, the reporter. And he thinks that the press has failed to take the full stock of Trump's menace. Quote, it's like you've all become numb by it, end quote, which is, by the way, 100% true. But the last paragraph is good. Even better. But he must also prepare for the prospect that this race will get very ugly. When I asked whether he thinks Trump will concede if he loses in 2024, Biden said no. Quote, losers who are losers are never graceful, end quote. He said, quote, I just think that he'll do anything to try to win. If and when I win, I think he'll contest it, no matter what the result is. So again, repeatedly referring to Donald Trump as a loser, which Donald Trump is. Again, Donald Trump lost the popular vote in 2016. He, under his leadership, his party lost in 2018, 2020, the Senate runoffs in 2021, 2022, 2023. Donald Trump is just objectively a political loser in the grand scheme of things. But the Fox Propaganda Network is really upset to some extent by this reporting. You have former Trump official Kayleigh McEnany, who works at the Fox Propaganda Network, and former George W. Bush press secretary Dana Perino, seemingly clutching their pearls. How dare Biden take this aggressive rhetorical approach?
But number two, if you read this entire New Yorker profile, what you find is someone who loves to engage in the MAGA attack lines, calling the former president a dictator, but not laying out a positive agenda. Does that work? We will see in time, but I think he would have a better go at it if he uses the State of the Union to create a positive narrative to move the country forward.
And also because he doesn't realize, I don't know how they don't realize this, because this was true about deplorables in 2016, that if he says you're a MAGA extremist, you don't care about America, you're a loser, that Trump supporters and voters think that they're talking about them.
Exactly.
And so that affects them.
And one last point on the MAGA language. I found it interesting in the piece. At one point, he throws down a paper in front of the reporter, and it's a list of all the things Trump has said, rhetoric that he didn't like, attacks on him, taking away, destroying the Constitution. It's just interesting to me that that's a paper the president would have on him as a ready go-to to toss out to a reporter.
Why not? So again, note the double standard. They're like, if you insult Trump, you insult his base. Okay, well, let's assume that that's the case. It shouldn't be, but let's assume that that's the case. Doesn't that logic also apply to Democrats? Shouldn't you be wagging your finger at Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans for insulting President Biden or prominent Democrats or just blue cities, blue states in general? But again, they don't care about that. It's the double standards, the asymmetry. They want the liberty to be able to say and do whatever they want whenever they want. They can't handle the prospect of a more rhetorically aggressive Democratic Party. But this is what Sarah Longwell, a longtime Republican strategist, had to say about President Biden's approach of going for the quote-unquote jugular.
I think we've hit a different moment in politics where I hear now, you certainly heard it from Republicans for a long time, they wanted a fighter. They chose Donald Trump because he went hard and mixed it up and went after their enemies. And now I hear from Democrats all the time, they're like, what they get frustrated with Joe Biden is that they feel like he's not enough of a fighter, that he's not out there enough taking swings. And so I saw reports the other day that Biden said his strategy is to go for the jugular on Trump. And I think that's the right thing to do. Offense, they need to go on offense now.
I agree. Now, listen, I'm not saying that needs to be the totality of your approach. I do agree that actually Kayleigh McEnany has some semblance of a point when she said that President Biden needs to lay out an affirmative agenda. I think that's absolutely true. But there's no reason why we can't do both when and where appropriate. I think when it comes to Trump and when it comes to elected MAGA Republicans, the leaders of this cult, I think President Biden, I think Democrats in general, I think you and I should take a much more rhetorically aggressive posture and call these people out for exactly what they are. Let me know what you think in the comments.